Hey guys, do you know someone considering renting their property as an Airbnb? I have worked with Rental Advisor for over a decade, and Rental Advisor provides free rental projections to prospective owners, realtors, and investors for any property in the US. So if you know someone considering getting into the vacation rental industry, have them email management@myrentaladvisor.com to get their free revenue projections. Hey everybody, looks like we're gonna have a round two here. Our first live stream got cut off, but we'll do it in two parts here. So anyway, Tember and I have been talking about same-sex attraction. We were talking specifically when we last ended about the church's resources. So what are your thoughts, Tember, on some of the church's resources?
I think the church's resources are elementary at best. There's a lot of, I think it leaves a lot to be done. I mean, I'll give the church, I'll give the church huge props for making progress in creating this website and doing what they're doing to create more of a dialogue and to reach out to LGBT individuals, and that's awesome. It's huge, but I think the church's resources leave a huge gap um, in trying. I think what most of us as same-sex attracted individuals are trying to do is figure out how to reconcile our faith with our sexuality.
Yeah.
And and that is really the main concern, is how do we how do we reconcile those two? How do we mesh those together?
And would you say this is, because as I've thought about this, the problem, I guess, in some ways isn't, in my mind, so much theological clarity. It's sort of like, all right, we have certain inclinations are not consistent with, God's plans. Fine. That part seems simple, but the challenge is, and I guess this is sort of the question. And again, I don't know if this is what you're asking, or I'm sorry, if what you're saying when you say, like, how do we reconcile it? But in my mind, trying to put myself kind of and empathize, if I were in those kind of shoes, my question, or at least the question I've had, is, so what should I do? Like, what is the lifestyle that I'm expected to live? And does it, and in some ways maybe that's simple, but in other ways it's not. And or at least it's not totally clear. And so I don't know, I guess, is that kind of what you mean? Or if not, what would?
Yeah, well, it's like how am I going to be happy in a heteronormative church?
Yeah.
And let's face the facts. The church and the gospel are heteronormative, okay?
Yeah.
That's just how. There's no way around it. I mean, we know the doctrine. Heavenly Father is married to our Heavenly Mother. That's a heterosexual union. And we know that we're here on earth to learn to be like them, so that eventually we can have a marriage and a family like them.
Yeah.
That's
and frankly, that is where I, on the theological level, when I am out sort of sword in hand, I'm not battling against gay people. I'm battling against ideas that try and say, no, that isn't the way it is, and that try and create these kind of false narratives that aren't coming from the top down, that are coming from the culture in. And to me, I say, whoa. If we're going to get guidance on this, it's got to come from here. Now, I'm not saying that we can't have our thoughts and feelings about things, like that's fine. But like, there's a lot involved in our theology that, someone said it, and I think it's accurate. If you were to say gay marriage can be, is part of this equation, it would break LDS theology, because it would alter so much, so deeply, that it would, it would be hard to figure out, like, what was this? Why were we so wrong on everything for so long? Yeah. And so I guess there's an element there. And again, I don't know if we are in total agreement on that, but it's just one of those things that for me, you know, it doesn't, like, it's very, very hard to figure it out. But at the same time, like, I get it. People who are in the situation, they want to find out, how can I be happy? What should I do to live my best life? And for a regular member of the church, it's super easy. It's just like, all right, well, you get married, go on a mission, have a bunch of babies, serve in your ward, and like be a good citizen, and boop. But you know, someone who's in that kind of a situation, it's a real challenge. And the church doesn't have a clear path, you know, as it were, in some respects. I mean, so anyway, it's challenging.
Yeah. And you know, there are some people that say, "Oh, well, it's look at all the single sisters that are in the church." You know, like it's the more or less the same issue. It's not, you know, because the single sisters, with all due respect for the people who give that analogy, it's not the same.
No, it isn't.
I could go out and I could find a partner pretty easily. Single sisters, it's not the same dynamic.
Yep.
And it's hard for us to see that we could potentially be having what we think is going to be a fulfilling relationship with a same-sex partner, husband or wife or whatever, and it's just this pesky doctrine that's holding us back. But I think it comes down to understanding our ultimate identity, kind of like what you're talking about. If the church were to allow for same-sex marriage, the total foundation of the gospel would be fundamentally transformed. I mean, I don't think it could be. I don't think it could be the same. I don't know. I don't think it could exist if that happened, because I mean, we're taught that men are that they might have joy, but how do we receive that joy? You know, it's as we multiply and replenish the earth, we have joy in our posterity, and same-sex unions don't procreate. You know, it just doesn't make sense
for me. And that's obviously super valid. And I'm totally with you. One of the other things that I think a lot of people miss is, and they should really take the time to understand it, is the notion of the masculine and the feminine within LDS thought. There's this notion of the masculine and feminine are like a yin and yang. They're two distinct,
they complete each other.
And that when they come together, they form a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts, because of the inherent differences in the masculine and in the feminine. And that goes deeper than just the notion of, it goes different than just the notion of like cultural masculinity or even physical. It's all of it. It's this, your identity as male and female on a spiritual level connects and complements one another. And that's why the scriptures say neither is the man without the woman, nor the woman without the man in the Lord. Or that's why Jesus Christ says, from the beginning, for this reason, God made them male and female, that the two will become one flesh. There's this, I mean, it's New Testament, it's all over. It permeates the different cultures, dispensations, all of it. And it's this consistent theme that to me, it's like, look, I empathize with the challenges. I sympathize with it. It's the hardest damn thing in the world in so many ways. I won't go so far as to say it is the hardest thing in the world, because there are things there are things in this world that are pretty dang terrible, but it is up there in that category of the worst things. Okay. It's tough, but can we change truth? And if we change truth and truth becomes relative, then you go back to where you were. You go back to this world. And that's where I think that people don't realize that when everything becomes relative, there is no meaning. And when you don't have meaning, you can never be truly happy. Right. Yeah. And that, to me, you know, so this is a much deeper issue, at least kind of in my own kind of exploration of it, than simply these guys are mean bigots and they don't like gay people, and that's why they have these silly notions, when it's really wrapped up in the whole meaning of life itself and what this is all about in kind of the LDS line of thought. And if you reject that, well, fine, then show me another line of thought that I can embrace. But this, it's very, very difficult. And you're right. The church, I think the church needs to, and I hope they will, and I think they will, find better ways to provide resources. So what though, with that in mind, I mean, most of us and people listening or whatever are going to be ordinary people. I'm not the prophet, and we'll just have to wait for them to do their thing. But what can ordinary members, there's things family members can do. We've kind of talked about that, but what can ordinary members of a ward, if they have a friend who's same-sex attracted that's in the church or out of the church, like what are some of the things that you would have as kind of guiding principles for them for what they can do to minister to people that are gay?
I think the biggest thing is just be educated. Be educated on the issues. And I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions in church culture still regarding homosexuality. I don't think so much in the United States. But I mean, I talk to members, same-sex attracted members all over the world, where there's lots of notions about homosexuality that if people could just be educated on the issue, it would
when
really
you say educated, what are kind of, let's say, top 2 or 3 things in your mind that like people need to understand if they're going to be able to work in this field or in this area at all with people that are dealing with same-sex? What are some of the things that they need to know?
Yeah, number one, I think I didn't choose my attractions.
Agreed.
It's not a choice. I'm not more likely to be a pedophile because I'm gay.
Mm-hmm.
And you think that's funny, but I had a relative of mine, after I was getting closer to joining the church, who asked me if I was attracted to children. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that was actually like people believe that, but a lot of people in the church, especially older generation people, think there's a closer correlation between homosexuality and pedophilia. And so that's a huge misconception. I mean, there's something else that I can't think of, but I mean, just things like that, and we're not trying to like prey on your youth and change them to be homosexual,
yeah. And I think that's something that I guess, and obviously like you can't, like, you're not going to make someone homosexual. People are homosexual because it's like, I'm not going to give somebody muscular dystrophy. Like it's they either have it or they don't. Like that's just the way it goes. So now, but in my mind, one thing that I think happens is that there are those within the LGBT activist community that maybe aren't trying to turn your kid gay, but that are definitely trying to turn your kid against the doctrines of the church. I think a good deal of that crowd that's out protesting in front of church headquarters aren't gay. In fact, I'd probably say the majority of them aren't, meaning that they were people that are being told like these, and so I kind of separate that kind of a gay person from an LGBT activist, because the activist crowd, they are moving aggressively, not to make people gay, but to say, we need to destroy institutions or alter institutions that don't accept this. And in the church, as we said, it's kind of like, if that's their stance, then logically it leads to the conclusion, like they are intent on destroying the church, because if they change it, it destroys it. And so,
I think I think, well, this isn't same-sex attraction, but I think a lot of that is also rethinking gender. I can't really empathize with people who have gender dysphoria. I don't understand it.
Mhm.
I'll be honest, but
Yeah,
I mean, I think that is a legitimate concern of people who are trying to come in and rethink everything gender, and that there is no gender. It's just whatever you identify as, and I think there's more of a threat to with that than there is from homosexuals.
absolutely.
But
Well, no,
in my
but yeah,
opinion,
I would agree 100% with you though that like there does need to be education in those areas. I agree 100%. I think that people don't need to be afraid of homosexuals. I don't think that they need to uh they don't need to um think that they're choosing it. That's a silly notion. Anyone who still
yeah,
thinks that, I'm just like, get out of here. Like, you don't know what are you talking about? You don't know any gay people. Um
yeah,
and so those kind of the good news is that I think that, like you're saying, in the United States, for the issues I have with some of the activism that has happened, I also there's a positive side to it. There is a side
hmm
where they have helped to educate people, they have helped to change people's minds, and I think that was necessary and good, right? So I have a more nuanced view than people might realize when it comes to some of this stuff. Now,
right.
let's kind of move on, as we're probably getting close to we're getting down to the second half of our time where we're probably going to wrap it up not too much longer. But
You could always
um,
do a part 3 later. So
yeah, we can always do part three later. True. But now your wife shows up at the ward. Tell me that story. How does that go?
yeah, so um, not to get into like too big of sacred experiences, we know we shouldn't talk about those, but um, basically, I after all the failed dating attempts, I'm kind of at a like wit's end here, like not interested at all, but I felt something for her, and I never felt that for a girl before, and I was thought I was just gonna brush it off, like I'm not interested in pursuing that, but I felt a quote from I think it was a quote from like Elder Ballard, like never uh, never miss out on an opportunity that's placed in your path. Basically, is what he said.
Mm-hmm.
And so, can you hear me? Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
sometimes like
coming
talk
in
really
good.
quiet. Uh, but and so I decided to pursue her, and I'll be honest, it wasn't the same sexual attraction I felt towards a guy, but I felt something for her and decided that I should pursue that, and yeah, the rest is history. So she had wanted nothing to do with me, but but
So
you keep trying, right?
well, and that's another thing. So tell me about so you guys date. Um, did she know immediate? Did she already know? Was this something that you came out and told her like on the first date, or is this something that came out later, or did she already know beforehand? What's kind of
Mhm.
the situation with it?
So with all my past dates, I already made a point to tell them very early on, like first or second date. So it was like, just so you know, this is who I am, and this is my history. So I always wanted to do that so there isn't like emotions built up, and then
Yeah, and
you
then
come
it's
to
like
find
when you
out
find out,
later, and then it's
yeah,
like devastating, like
you're a brave man,
so
a good man.
yeah. So I told her on the second date. And I found out she knew already because I had given a fireside previously in the ward, and I had talked about my conversion story, and that was part of my conversion story. And someone in the Relief Society had talked to Tiffany and told her, and so anyway, but she appreciated the fact that I told her uh, early on, and so that was something we could work on and talk about and see if we really wanted to go that path, if she was willing to accept that and deal with that the rest of our married lives, because it's not like it goes away. I think
Yeah,
that was a thing back in like the 80s and 70s, where if you had same sex attraction, marriage will
get
solve
married,
it.
it'll go away. Yeah.
Yeah, doesn't work that way. In fact, it causes a lot of divorces.
Yes. Yes, it does.
um,
That's why I say I
but
don't always go and recommend it to like that isn't the path
yeah,
I say to everybody that's what they should do.
yeah, and I think
I don't say it's a path that a person shouldn't take, but I
mhm.
say that like that's got to be your decision. You got to know where you're at and what you and how you're going to navigate this. You know what I
You
mean?
really have to be in tune with the spirit, because the Spirit may lead you in that way, but it may not, and that's okay. Um, the Jesus taught, and I'm paraphrasing again, that some are made eunuchs of men, some are born eunuchs, and some make themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of God's sake.
I'm so glad
Right?
you brought up that scripture.
And yeah, I mean that I mean I never saw it that way in connection with same-sex attraction before, but I've come to realize, hey, this applies totally to us. That there are some people who are going to have to be celibate for mortality, and that is okay. That is a holy and righteous calling if that's what you're called to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, you don't want to ruin a spouse's life if you have same-sex attraction. It's really difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like this has been easy for me and Tiffany. We've really had challenges. I mean, and I understand, like, I understand, I empathize with her because I know it is difficult for her at times.
Yeah.
But you know what? We're both committed to the Lord, and we try to keep the Lord the center of our marriage, and it makes things work out, you know? But,
that's awesome.
yeah.
One little thought on that is, there are those people out there that just can't imagine that Jesus Christ would ever ask someone to live a celibate lifestyle.
Hmm.
And I send them that scripture because it's like he literally expressly in the New Testament said, yes, I do. And not only that, he's called on us to be willing to sacrifice everything. But what also is interesting in that verse is he prefaces it with something on the lines of, not everyone can accept this, but those who can should.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting that he said that, because I don't know that everyone can accept that. Mm-hmm. And I want one thing to be clear, like, at least from my perspective, like, I admire what you're doing so much, but I also would say, like, this is Tember's way based on his spiritual journey. But the key is that you're doing your best to follow Christ. And what someone else does as their best to follow Christ may look very different.
Right.
And that to me is like, that's such a personal thing between you and the Lord that it remains between you and the Lord. Right. And so I personally, people get very prescriptive and like, okay, well, that means Jacob wants everybody to go and be like Tember and or to be celibate or whatever. And I don't have an answer to that. I just say, look, follow the Savior and he will guide you to what you need to do. And I admire the path that you've gone down, because I really think what has come through in all of it, just based on me hearing your story, is that as you said, you put Christ at the center, right?
I do my best.
and that's all you can do. Like, and that's that level of faith in, like, I feel like a loser. Like, I don't have that kind of faith. Right. And so anyway, I just wanted to, and well, so you guys get married. Anything else before you guys get married?
I just want to interject something here. Like, along those lines, like, we don't know what that journey is for you. Like you said, if there's someone who's struggling with that, do I leave the church? Do I stay in the church but pursue a same-sex relationship within the church? I don't know. Mm-hmm. You and me, I'm sure we don't hold judgment. I do not let me backtrack. I have a friend who, he's really struggling. He's a returned missionary. He's a really good guy. And he's really struggling, knowing where to go with this. And he's really considering, like, I know this is true. I just can't handle not having anyone. And I need to see what it's like being in a same-sex relationship. And he said, I'm committed to chastity, but I just need to know what it's like. And I'm like, I don't condone that. I wouldn't recommend it, but that may be necessary for him in his journey to help him learn what's true, for him. And I don't mean to say what's true for him, like there's different truths, there's one truth, but he needs to learn for himself what's right for him. And
maybe that is the best that he can do.
yeah, exactly. And I I don't hold any I don't know, I don't hold any grudge for him for doing that, and I still love him as a friend, and I will always love him and support him. You know, if he decides to go get married with a guy, you know, I'm still gonna love him as a friend, you know? Um, you know, I don't have to agree with every action to love someone,
Yes,
and and to love someone deeply. I can deeply love him and disagree with actions, you know?
absolutely.
So, yeah, anyway, I
No,
just had a
that's
bit
and
more.
that's we're on the same page with that. I agree
Yeah.
100%. So once you guys, so one thing that people will say, I think I may have people that I know that their feelings towards people in mixed orientation marriages are like, these people are doing something bad. This that it's not going to work. They kind of have a real.
Betraying themselves,
What
like
was that?
you're betraying yourself, you know, betraying
Yeah,
your
exactly.
yeah,
What
your
do what do
identity.
you say to someone who has that sort of an attitude toward you? Is there any what are your
Mhm.
feelings about people who think that?
Well, I can totally understand where they're coming from.
Mhm.
I mean, I get why they think that. I mean, I think people who think that are genuinely concerned because they're like, oh my gosh, this person's going to be miserable his whole life. He's never going to be fulfilled, you know, emotionally and sexually with someone. And you know what? In a sense, you're right. You know, there are things that we sacrifice for the Lord. And, you know, I'm not going to say that my relationship with my wife is the same as it was with my boyfriends, but that's okay. You know, it's it's more to me. There's the spiritual fulfillment and emotional fulfillment I receive from my marriage is more important to me than an amazing sex life.
Yeah.
And just to be very frank,
No, that's
and and I think I think people just think of the temporal your temporal identity when you should be thinking of your eternal identity. I'm a son of God. I have the potential to become like him,
mhm.
and I'm doing my best to live up to that mortality, and the things that are lacking in my mortal experience will be made up eventually. That's
Yeah.
okay. You know,
That
it's not yeah, it's not easy, but the first will be last and the last will be first and everything will be made right.
yes.
So,
What and that's I couldn't have said it better, and that's an absolutely beautiful thing. One um thing that you said and that is sort of the fulfillment you get spiritually and kind of having your relationship with your wife. Now you guys have children. How many children do you
mhm.
have?
We have one and another on the way
All right.
in April. Yeah.
Awesome. And how has having a child affected your life?
Oh my gosh. I thought I knew what love was before I had a child, and like it makes me understand the plan of salvation so much. It's so much clearer when you have a child. And I don't know. I know so much more that the plan of salvation is real, that the gospel is true because of having children.
Yeah.
And my love has deepened because of it. And it it makes me understand more what the Father feels about us
Hmm.
because of how I feel about my children.
Yeah.
And you know, it's that it's just amazing. I wouldn't have it any other way. You know?
So, um, so one other thing that I was thinking about was like when I had my children, same kind of thing. It was like there's this whole other level where it's like, look, I love my wife, but these kids, like, I'll freaking run into a burning building anytime,
Yeah,
3 times, and
yeah,
I I don't care if there's fire. Like, I won't die. I'll get in there and save them because you just freaking love those kids, man.
yeah.
And now, um, Now, one other thing that I've realized as I've been married and as I've watched people that are married is, yes, there is a level of fulfillment that's there with kind of the sexual romance side of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we all know that over time that changes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not popular to say, and I might end up in the doghouse because of it, but like Eric and I's sort of sexual tension when we were first married or dating was at a different level than what it's at now. That naturally happens when you kind of accustomed to someone else. Now, that's still a very important part of our relationship. And I can see that for you, that, you know, obviously that's an aspect of your relationship that's much more difficult than it is for me and my wife. However, that thing which was so important when we were dating, like it was like we were running on sexual tension and, you know, that was it, is now like 25% of the relationship is that. And 75% of it is all this other stuff. It's our life together. It's like now we are a family. We're not just these people that are romantically into each other, right?
These lovebirds all
These
the time,
lovebirds.
you know?
Exactly. It's a mature love for one another that is in a way disconnected from just the sexual side of it. And I think everybody kind of knows that that's been married for a while. We all kind of get to that point. And when you bring children into it, it's like, again, the marriage becomes about them, less than it becomes about your romantic. Now, it doesn't, now that part of it we have to nurture, we have to work on it. It does have to be there. And for you, obviously, it's much more of a challenge. But I think we live in a culture that has been so affected by romanticism and by these notions of kind of happily ever after marriages where they're not real life. Okay. Real life isn't like that.
Well, it's we live in a society where it's very Disney centric, you know, like we're supposed to have these, you know, when you marry for love and, you know, it's this live happily ever after kind of thing. Like, and for most of the world's history, in biblical history, and for most of the world still, marriage isn't for love. It's out of a social duty. And, you know, I'm not saying it's bad to marry out of love. I think
I agree 100%.
You know, I think it's wonderful. Yeah.
Loving marriages are the way to go.
Definitely do that, you know, but there are many cultures in the world, including biblical culture, in which you married because it was assigned, you know, and you come to love each other as the marriage progresses and love each other more. And because you build, it's not based off of sexual attraction, it's based off of an emotional, emotionally nurturing each other and serving each other and building that foundation on Christ and
a common mission, I might say.
Common mission.
I might say that becomes what your marriage. It starts off with this sort of sexual romantic tension, but then I believe really good, successful marriages end up becoming successful and wonderful not because they just maintain this wonderful romantic sex life the whole time, but really because they find a deeper purpose for themselves as a partnership that says, this is what our life as a partnership is all about. And that becomes the new wellspring of their great marriage. And to me, again, I'm not saying that this is the route that everyone should go, but meaning like the route that you've gone into a mixed orientation marriage. But I would say, just from my perspective, being married and from kind of understanding and watching a lot of people that are married, marriage is much bigger than just the sexual tension side of it. And so much of the fulfillment of marriage, while that is still a major part of it, I don't want to downplay that. There's an enormous amount that comes from the other part of it.
Well, that's all that stuff, the emotional connection, the spiritual connection, serving each other, that stuff, to be frank, makes sex more fulfilling. Yes. It makes your sexual relationship much more fulfilling and honestly spiritual. It makes it a sacrament rather than just a carnal satisfaction, which is fine. That's good, you know, but I think there's a higher level you can achieve through really fostering that friendship and a deeper relationship with your wife than more than just the carnal side of it, you know? Absolutely. So, yeah.
And that's something that all marriages, I think, struggle with. And I think a lot of marriages end because they never transitioned from the sexual tension to the couple relationship. And that's hard for heterosexual people, right? So there's a whole lot to this, I think, that people miss when it comes to, and I think just assuming that, oh, they're going to be miserable for the rest of their life. It's sort of like, a lot of people's sexual part of their marriage falls apart pretty bad, but they're able to maintain other things in their marriage, even heterosexual marriages, and still have pretty dang good marriages, even though their sex life is, a C minus.
Next to nothing. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
we're all going to get old and flabby eventually. And
exactly.
Like if your marriage is based off of the physical, it's going to be kind of miserable.
Well, and this is one thing too, that as I look at what you're doing, and I think about, okay, as Tember ages, you're going to have children. You're going to have grandchildren. You're going to have because of the sacrifices that you're making, that there are other blessings that are in store for you that may not be in store for other people that have chosen a different path. And so there are blessings and sacrifices to be made in any path that we choose. With that said, now there are those that immediately will listen to this and retort, well, adoption. And I would say to that, yes, an adopted child in a relationship can be absolutely just as fulfilling for the parents of that adopted child as their own biological children. I have no doubt about that. That's not what I'm saying. But adoption creates a little more of a complicated issue. And let me, and my personal stance on it, and I don't know what yours are because we haven't ever talked about this before. Mm-hmm. My personal stance is that I have no problem with children being able to be adopted by gay parents. I don't have a problem with that. However, if I do believe a child does have a right to a mother and a father, and I would give precedence if you have two equally qualified couples and you have a male and a male and have a male and a female, I think you have a very hard case to say that it's better for that it doesn't matter that this child will not have a mother, and the feminine it is a more ideal relationship there. Now, in an ideal world, which we don't live in, which is why I'm glad that these children do go to these gay parents, because if they don't have a heterosexual couple that will take them, by all means, put them with two gay people who will love them and raise that child.
Right.
But on the other side of the equation, I say, what happens? There still is a limited number of children. If we start to get to a point to where, we kind of think about this more theoretically rather than practically, theoretically, no child should ever need to be adopted. They should have their mother and their father. And that leaves homosexual, they leave these homosexual people without children. So and again, on a practical level, like, yes, I want them to be able to adopt and all that, but on sort of in the ideal scenario, you can see that it doesn't fit into the plan of a perfect world.
Well, it all comes down to having an internal perspective. It's like, like you, I fully support gay people adopting. I think it's great. It's wonderful that those kids have a chance to actually have a family and have loving parents. But I know that those relationships end at death. It's not going to continue into the next life. Mm-hmm. And that's the tragic part. Mm-hmm. Because I fully believe that same-sex partners and same-sex marriages and their children can have very fulfilling, happy lives. I really believe that. I don't believe what some members of the church think that, because they're living in sin, they're not going to be happy. Yeah. I think they do have a level of happiness. I know I did with my boyfriends.
Yeah, I agree.
But the ultimate tragedy, and this is another thing that really made me realize I needed to join the church, is I knew that there was no hope for my relationship with my boyfriend to last after we died. I knew there wasn't a because no other church teaches that.
Well, that totally changes everything. Just so you know, that is one of those paradigm shifters that just, let's say that it was known 100% that same-sex attraction was only something that exists in mortality, and I believe that it is. But let's just say that there was no doubt about it. No one could even doubt it. It was like there was just like a banner from God that came down and was like, "Hey, this is it." That radically transforms it. And on the other hand, it totally transforms it. People say it's eternal, okay? Which I don't believe, okay? So, and I think that's where the main divide is, I would say, amongst people on this issue, is those who recognize that it's something temporary. Because if it is, like you're saying, now that doesn't mean that you and your boyfriend wouldn't have a relationship in the next life that would still exist, or that the children that, you know, like if you guys had adopted, that you guys would still have a relationship, but it would be a different relationship.
Yeah, we couldn't be co-creators. That's the big issue. That's the big difference.
Co-creators. Your children can't be sealed in the same sense to a, like, again, and to me, and going to kind of the doctrinal stuff, which, you know, some of it can be a little hazy, is that ideal of the masculine and feminine being united together as the foundational relationship unit that around which form these other relationships of siblings and others that because at the end of the day, one thing we do know is this, and I think everyone pretty much agrees on this. The thing that we all care about and that brings us the greatest joy in our lives are our relationships with other people. Okay. And to me, that's what the gospel is. It's about creating these perfectly aligned oneness, as Jesus talks about in John 17, with the Father and with one another. And one of the ways that oneness gets created is between the male and the female, the masculine and the feminine, this yin and yang coming together to form this something greater than the sum of the parts. And that simply is not possible within the context of a same-sex relationship, because gender is part of our eternal identity and purpose. And that to me is kind of like, it's here's the problem. It's true, but it's a hard truth. And that's some people don't want to accept that some truth hurts and is hard. But what do we do with truths that are hard? Do we just ignore them? Do we pretend that they're not true when they are? Like,
some people want to.
Exactly. And that's where that is my thing, is like, you're not actually helping people when you tell them things that aren't true, but that feel good. Right. Yeah. We have to confront the way reality is, and then do everything we can to help each other to navigate the way things are. And, you know, so anyway, that's my little on that.
Yeah. Amen. No, I think you're right.
Let's, so you're married, you have children, active in your ward. What do you do in your ward, by the way? You have a calling?
I am the Temple and Family History leader.
Nice.
So it's formerly called the Temple and Family History Director, I think. I don't know. I lead the consultants, so I'm also a primary worker, which is awesome. I love working with the kids. It's great to be in there, like energetic for singing time.
Excellent.
I love that. It's great.
Awesome. Well, so last thing I wanted to do, now that we've kind of talked about your story, which has inspired me and made me think and is awesome, and I want everyone to hear it, well, and I guess I also want to clarify this about your story. I don't just admire your story because of the way that you've gone. I admire people that go in other directions. What I admire about your story, and if your story goes in other directions, you know, whatever a person's story goes, if they've placed their faith in Christ and they're doing their best to follow him, I admire that, especially when they face challenges that are a lot bigger than mine. So thank you for all of that. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about some of the controversy and things that are going on surrounding like BYU and the protests and these kind of things. And what's your perspective on all that that's going on?
Oh man. I think BYU screwed up. I think, well, I don't know if it was BYU. I don't know how it works over there.
Somebody
But
screwed up.
there, yeah, there was a professor, and I won't name his name, but that video should have never been put out. That whoever called the office and was giving affirmative answers that yes, gay dating was cool, like it just created a lot of confusion. Like,
Yeah.
and then to have a general authority come in and basically be the bad guy because of such a huge miscommunication. It's just
But what do you think about
I
the reaction to it from kind of the gay community that,
the protests.
the
Well, they
protest?
said it wasn't a protest. It was I don't know. They said something else, but they have the right to do it. But I don't. You can't petition. I don't know. You can't protest the church into doing things. Those things are received through revelation. And I mean, I personally
What
don't
do you think? What do
believe.
you think they're protesting for? Like, what's your impression of what they actually? Because I sit there and go, like, what are you asking for? Are you asking for the church to come out and say that, gay dating is a-okay morally?
Well, I think it's a step towards what progressive Mormons want. They want to see gay relationships accepted within the church, just like any heterosexual relationship.
Full
I mean,
on simple
let's be
marriage.
frank.
Yeah, that's what they want.
Let's be frank about it. That's what it is. And um, I I know a lot of people that want that. They're faithful members of the church. They're active, but they fully believe that it's going to be accepted at some point.
They see
And
themselves like kind of like they see themselves as, oh, well, we're the people in the church in 1977 that were really mad about the ban on blacks in the priesthood. That's the line that
but
everyone else.
there's no comparison.
Yeah.
The reason is because the scriptures never teach a restriction on priesthood due to your skin color. You can't find it. The scriptures do teach, however, that homosexual sex is a sin.
Yeah.
I mean, it teaches there are 5 scriptures that teach it very clearly in the Old and New Testament. And in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every truth will be established, and you can't go against that.
Yeah, and I
But
have a whole blog basically that I just wrote about that very topic. But you're right. I mean, the comparisons are they're just kooky.
it doesn't hold
We at one
water. I mean,
time were ordaining black men to the priesthood. Like, I don't know of any time when we were gay marrying people in the past.
yeah. I mean, Joseph Smith ordained blacks, and then it was, well, won't get into it. I have my own opinions on that, but
for sure, and that's a whole tangent in and of itself.
Yeah,
but regardless, obviously, now with that, the church needs to draw it. It goes back to me to this difficult situation the church is in. Okay, because they're dealing with people that, like you, after your mission, are really struggling to figure out what the heck am I going to do, or the teenage you who hear things in church that kind of make them resentful or scared or whatever. And so they want to address that. But then they have others kind of on the progressive side that are taking that, and any movement towards compassion or towards, being nice to gay people basically is they're going to legalize marriage. Like that's where we're going. Let's keep rallying. We're making progress, people. Like, do you, what advice do you have for someone like me, a faithful member on the same page with you? How do we thread that line, and how should we respond to this? Those who are kind of calling me names, saying I'm a bigot, saying I'm a homophobe, all this kind of stuff, simply because I have that. What's your perspective on how I should react to someone like that? or to the progressive movement within the church?
I don't know. It's hard for me, to be honest, still, but I guess I just have to. I guess I'll respond by giving my own experience, I guess, because I have friends and I know people who are in the church who are like that. They're the progressive Latter-day Saints who are trying to push that agenda, and I just I try my best, even though we have a strong disagreement. I try to just love them still as my brother and realize we still agree on most things. There's some things we strongly disagree with, and I'm going to choose to love you, and we can both agree on the fact that it would hopefully we both agree on the fact that it would take a revelation, and we need to respect the authority of the prophet to receive that revelation, and not try to petition the prophet into doing something. I don't know if I'm answering that, but I guess it just comes down to having charity, and
Mm-hmm.
just I think we need to be lovingly bold with the truth.
Yeah.
And like it says in section, what is it, 121, where we need to correct it at times with sharpness, but afterwards show an increase of love, so that they don't esteem you as your
I like that.
enemy. You know,
That to me, and people kind of know me for. It's funny, if you meet me in person, they know me because I'm pretty nice and full of love, and we'll hang out. And people don't actually, like, if you knew me in the ward, like, I'm kind of like the nice guy. Like, everybody, like, oh yeah, Jacob. Like, now, granted, I don't talk about a lot of, like, get into these sorts of, like, tough
yeah,
issues with a lot of people on that level. And if I do, I try and keep it, as civil as I can. I do a pretty good job of it, I think. But obviously, online, it's kind of a different world. But also online, that is, for me, it's something that I try and I kind of fall under the sharpness side more so than the, hey, I want to be lovey-dovey, because, and maybe I'm wrong for this, I don't know. But one thing is, a lot of the stuff I do online, I'm not really trying to convince people of anything. I'm just trying to speak truth boldly, without filter. Never attack a person, but attack ideas sort of without filter. Now, I'm not perfect. I may razz people sometimes more than I should, but it is a tough line to draw, because there is a need for sharpness, and then there's a need for love, and that's never an easy dynamic, I think,
it's
in any
not.
situation.
Yeah, I mean, there have been things that I've been very passionate about that people are, especially over this issue, where I've wanted to be confrontational on, but I realized that that's not the way. I don't know. It's not easy for me. I don't have a right answer. All I can say is we have to try our best to love them and be cordial, and you know
And be civil.
realize we're still, be civil. We're in the same church, and so
Well, it's
yeah,
definitely something that I struggle with, for sure.
yeah.
But getting back to something, or kind of the core we're talking about, kind of with same-sex attraction, we're getting kind of to the end here. So I wanted to kind of give you a chance to, are there any other things that we haven't touched on that you want to talk about, or any kind of final things that you want to go over?
Well, I guess there was something we left off on before the connection kind of cut out there, that for those people who are really struggling right now, who are trying to um, figure out which direction they're going to go. What advice you asked me, what advice I had for people like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first thing is to be anxiously engaged in a good cause, like, and that's not going to solve everything. It's
Mm-hmm.
there's still going to be hard times, but as you're actively engaged in the Lord's work, you have joy, and you're able to receive answers to uh, the struggles that you have and the peace and the comfort that you need in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a huge thing. I think another huge thing is learning to develop healthy non-sexual relations with same-sex peers. Um, that's I'm trying. How do I explain this without going off on a tangent? So I feel like there's a double standard when it comes to male relationships in the church and like same-sex male relationships. And I'm not talking about sexual, but like for instance, with girls in the church, or just girls in general, like it's totally cool. Like if you're at a church dance and you see two girls dancing with each other just as friends, like that's totally accepted. But if you saw it with guys, that's gay,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I think that's something we as a culture need to change and realize that men need those healthy, non-sexual relationships just as much as girls need those types
Mm-hmm.
of relationships. And especially for people with same-sex attraction, we need to be able to foster those types of relationship in a healthy way so that it's
So, and
not
with the idea that
sexualized all the way.
so that way they could get so that way they could still have connection with other people, because maybe
Yeah.
that non-sexual yet friendship
Mhm.
is important. And to be honest, this is one of the things that it's an aspect of same-sex attraction that I've observed with men specifically. Men need other men that they can become good friends with.
Yeah.
And like we hunger for it.
Yes.
Guys need their guy friends, their buddies, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that I think is, and I would say maybe one of the greatest challenges for those that I see who deal with same-sex attraction is that it's very difficult. Oftentimes they have interests that are very different than your traditional kind of football playing dudes and I don't want to play on like stereotypes, because I think there's gay people of all different types, but at least when I've observed it, men generally bond with other men through shared activities or interests that they do together, not through talking with one another. It's like guys go and do something together, hunting or football or whatever. And one of the challenges is that the interests of gay men a lot of the times are very different than heterosexual men. And so it just is hard for heterosexual men, even if they want to. Like my interests and the interests of my uncle are very different. Very different. He likes Disney princess shows and he's like super into that kind of stuff. And I can't get into it. I mean, I can try and I try to. Not to say, I mean, we don't have any shared interests. We do, but it's harder to find them. And on kind of a two-way street level here, I think that gay men and heterosexual men need to work to try and find the things that they can unite over to develop genuine friendships and not just tolerance. Because I think that what a lot of heterosexual men do is they tolerate gay men, but they don't go hang out with them ever.
Yeah. Well, it's because this guy's going to be attracted to me, kind of a.
And I wonder if that's a true narrative, though. I wonder how much it is. Because like my brother, my uncle, my cousin, some of these other people that are gay that I'm around, I'd gladly hang out with them. I would. Like I don't feel like they're going to hit on me or something. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about it at all. Now some people may, and I think that's kind of stupid. But what I do worry about is, but what the problem is, I just couldn't. There aren't things that we genuinely really are into together. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't happen ever, but it does but it's just hard. And so sometimes people will treat heterosexuals like heterosexual men, like you guys hate gays, when a lot of it comes down to, I just have a hard time developing a deep friendship with this person because men are wired to be friends with those who share their interests. And that's why I think a lot of women are friends with gays, is because they share a lot of the same interests.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying, again, I don't want to stereotype because I know that there's all sorts of different variations on it. But when you look at some of the general patterns, and at least in my experience, that's been something that I've struggled with because I want to have those better relationships. And
Yeah.
so, and I don't know. I mean, that is something that I wish it were different.
Yeah, and I don't know the exact answer to that, and how to exactly fix that. But like you said, men hunger to have those Jonathan and David. To give a biblical example, Jonathan and David had a super close relationship. In fact, it says that their friendship was sweeter than their marriages.
Yeah.
And it's like men want that type of relationship. It's not a homosexual thing. It's just a brotherhood thing.
Yes.
And I think when men or women with same-sex attraction, when they don't see those things, those needs fulfilled, it will manifest itself even more that, oh my gosh, it must be because I'm gay and I need to live that way to find that fulfillment rather than finding it in a healthy way. Does that make sense? I
That
don't
makes
know.
perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. And that, like you said, the word you use, brotherhood. Guys want brotherhood. Do
Yeah.
you think, and so what you're saying, if I'm understanding you right, is that gays want brotherhood as well?
Yeah, they need it. You need that. If you're especially if you're trying to stay active in the church and you're pretty certain you're going to be celibate the rest of your life, you need to have, even if not, I need that
Yeah.
type of relationship. All of us do. And you need friends like that to be accountable to be able to buoy you up, and yeah. Anyway.
No, it's definitely an aspect of the conversation that I don't think gets had.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, here's my thing. If I have a child who's gay, like a son who's gay, and I have 3 sons, so who knows, maybe one of them are. My biggest concern for them initially, and probably even primarily, is not moral or anything or salvation related by any stretch of the imagination. My biggest concern is them growing up and having friends and having buddies, so that they don't feel alone. Because
Exactly.
I've witnessed that, and I've experienced it to some extent. I had a kind of a time in my life where I kind of was the outcast kid at school, and I've seen that is, when you're a
It's
kid
horrible.
growing up, like your friends become the whole measure of your worth and existence, and helping kids to develop good, healthy friendships and to have that, and especially for young men, brotherhood, to have your boys, that you're with, like bridging that gap between gay men and giving them the sense of brotherhood. Like you said, I don't have the answer either. I don't think either of us do.
Yeah.
But I think it's a problem that people don't talk about enough, and that the consequences are enormous. Like, I honestly believe that much of the suffering that can even lead people to suicide, one of the biggest factors, and I've done a little studying on suicide, is loneliness. It's feeling alone.
Yep.
And the people that commit suicide, a lot of the times, they're very lonely, like especially with, and that's heterosexual or homosexual. But the thing is that homosexuality, gay kids who can't relate to other young men around them who lack a brotherhood, it just exacerbates the problem. And so people may say like, oh, they committed suicide because people were mean to them because they're gay. And maybe that's true to some extent, but I have to imagine that a lot of it is being driven by loneliness, by the fact that they are, that the other, and I specifically relate to men because this is just kind of the world that I know. Like, I can't understate enough the importance of a brotherhood to a 13-year-old boy. A 13-year-old boy who feels like he doesn't fit in, who has bad messages being, from maybe someone at church, who has no friends, because not because the guys at school hate him, but because he just isn't into the things that they're into. And so he's alone at lunch and all, it's just like, it's soul crushing. And to me, that to me is far more of a concern, the well-being of my little boy, then what's going to happen in the eternities? Because I have a lot of faith that God is just and that things work out. But boy, oh boy, in the short term, to see a little boy suffering alone, that breaks you in two. And it's something that, if there's anything that I could say and that I want for my gay brothers and sisters, it's that you don't feel alone. It's that they know that. I mean, then a doctrinal stuff, whatever, when I get to the personal level, it comes down to that I care about you and that you're not alone, and that but it's hard when they're kids, because kids can be hell. They're horrible. They're terrible to one another. And we all know that because we grow out of it to some extent. And that's what I worry about for any young man who may be dealing with this. And I just hope that they know that it gets better and that people change, and that I hope that our culture, that it is getting down to the kid level, to where little kids who maybe, or young adults who do know what gay is, don't, harass those kids, and that they do treat them right. And those are things that, where there are cultural shifts in this direction that I think have gone too far. We needed to move towards the better treatment of people in those situations. And I thank God for the people who helped to make that happen. Even if people have pushed it too far, that's a price I'm willing to pay to at least move us in what I believe is the right direction towards the way we need to treat our brothers and sisters.
Right. Yep.
So anyway, sorry, I kind of ran away with that one.
That's okay. It's important.
But I wanted to, I guess I'll kind of leave, I think we're about out of time now. I'll kind of leave you with the final word of just what would you say to the just general membership of the church from the perspective, we've been told we need to listen to people who deal with same-sex attraction. That's why I wanted to have this discussion with you, and while I'll continue to have them with others, inside or outside of the church. What do you say to those that want to listen?
I guess just have faith in us and know that we can do great things in your ward, and we can, it's going to be hard for us, but that we can, we have talents and gifts that we can use in your ward and to help build the kingdom of God. And I think that's what it comes down to.
I agree 100%. Amen. I hope that we do a better job of taking advantage of the wonderful people in our wards who are same-sex attracted, gay, whatever somebody wants to call them. And I think you've been a great example of what I hope other people can aspire to when it comes to faith. And that's not just for people that are gay, but heterosexual people like me. I feel much smaller than I used to after speaking with you, Tember. I feel like I have to grow my faith. So thank you very much.
I have my things I'm working on too, Jacob.
Hey, I'm sure we all do, but you've done some amazing things. You're an inspiration to me. I appreciate you. Love you as a brother in the gospel. And no matter what, moving forward, you ever need somebody to talk to or want to chat about whatever, by all means, consider me a friend and someone who's around to talk to you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Jacob.
All right. Take care, buddy.
Have a good night.
You
Bye.
too. So do you enjoy the content here on Thoughtful Faith? If so, be sure to hit the notification bell. This ensures that our new videos show up on your feed. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group called Thoughtful Saints, where myself and others discuss the sorts of topics found on this channel. And lastly, if you think other people would benefit from this video, please be sure to share it.